Okay, so now I'm going to explain positive externalities. And positive externalities are all caused by there being external benefits this time. External benefits are benefits that accrue or occur to third parties. And it sounds nice. Somebody who hasn't been involved in the decision making, so that's what a third party is, neither the producer nor the consumer, benefiting from somebody else carrying out an action, or somebody else, a firm, deciding to produce something. So it sounds like it's a really good thing, but we're going to see that it's actually a cause of market failure. So again, I'm going to start with my diagrams, and we can get positive externalities in production and positive externalities in consumption. The consumption diagram is actually the more common one for textbooks, so you might see that more commonly. So again, always remembering to label our diagrams. They're micro diagrams, so we've got price and quantity, and even if we don't know what to do, we just start off with our cross in the middle and we're labeling supply that's sloping upwards and demand that's sloping downwards. Okay, so it actually, both diagrams look really similar to the negative externality diagram. So positive externalities in production have two supply curves, and positive externalities in consumption as well as negative externalities in consumption have two demand curves. That was a bit of a wavy demand curve there. I didn't actually mean to do that. So if you can get mixed up between these diagrams and the negative externality diagrams because they actually are quite similar. So first of all, what you might want to think is, what is actually the market failure that's happening with positive externalities? And it's actually under production, under consumption. So when we're labelling our axes, actually, I always kind of keep my labelling quite consistent. So I always have Q2 as the socially optimal equilibrium and Q1 as the actual equilibrium. Now, some textbooks might do that the other way around. It's not too important, but just as long as when you're writing in the essay part, in the description part, in the analysis part of your work, you're referring to the actual equilibrium as P1 and Q1 if that's the way you've labelled it, and the socially optimal one as P2, Q2. So this is S1 and this is S2, and over here I've got P1, Q1, and Q2, and here P1. Okay, mistake, P2. So D1, D2, there, just falling off the page a little bit there. And what we've got here is Q2 is on the outside this time on both of the diagrams, unlike the previous diagrams in negative externalities that I drew when it was on the other side. So what's happening is, I'll go through positive externalities in production first. So a firm is actually producing here. This is their equilibrium, P1, Q1, and if they could feel these external benefits and take them into account, they would expand their supply. There would be way more supply in the market. There would be way more, firms in the market if they could really feel the benefits. And the actual equilibrium, of course, is here at S1. But if they could feel the benefits, it would actually be there. So the socially optimal equilibrium is Q2, P2. So what's happening is, and if you go from your old equilibrium, or your actual equilibrium, not old equilibrium, and you either on these diagrams have to go up or down to meet the next curve here. In this case, it's going down. So you can see my blue dotted line there. That represents the external benefit that's being produced here by this firm producing something. Now, It could be various things. Students always seem to find this one quite difficult to give examples for, but we used an example today in class where we're talking about a factory that maybe opens up or expands, and it has a positive externality maybe on the local sandwich shop because there's more employees and then more people go to that sandwich shop. So in macroeconomics you'd call that a multiplier effect, but here in micro we've got an external benefit. And this, what I'm shading in here, is the welfare loss to society. So the problem is, although it is having a positive benefit, if we think about that sandwich shop, the sandwich shop are getting a lot more income from it. If the factory itself could feel that benefit, if they were actually getting the extra income, they would actually extend their output from Q1 to Q2. Actually, Q2 would be the socially optimal, but they can't feel that benefit. You know, the sandwich shop is not part of the factory, so they're actually at Q1, so there's underproduction in the market, and that's going to be the problem of positive externalities. If we look at the other diagram, positive externality and consumption, this is the more typical diagram that you get. We've got our actual equilibrium here, but if consumers themselves could feel all these external benefits, if they were actually internalised, this is a phrase we often get when we're looking at the solutions, the government aims to internalise those external benefits, or in the case of negative externality, internalise those external costs. If they could actually internalise those external benefits, as I was saying, the equilibrium would be here. This is the socially optimal equilibrium, but they can't. They can't actually feel those external benefits because those accrue to a third party. So they are here at P1, Q1. But if they could feel those benefits, there'd be much more demand in the market because of those benefits, and so demand would have shifted further out. People would be willing to pay a much higher price for them, and the equilibrium quantity would be much higher. So to show the deadweight loss or welfare loss to society, you go from your actual equilibrium, you have to either go up or down. We can see here that the other curve is above it. If we go down, we're just going to hit the axes there. So we go up, and that line there represents the external benefits, and if we shade that triangle, if we shade that in, there we have the welfare loss. So at the beginning of the presentation I said, oh, it sounds quite nice, doesn't it? And a lot of students think, oh, what's the problem with positive externalities? But the problem is this, that you have underproduction. So if the firm in the positive externality in production, or the consumer, the positive externality in consumption, if they could actually feel those external benefits themselves, or those external benefits were actually private benefits, then they would either consume, there would be a high amount of demand in the market with the case of positive externalities in consumption, or in the case of positive externalities in production, there'd be much larger supply in the market. So, you know, when you're doing essays about these diagrams, it's really important to finish with there's a misallocation of resources in this market. So too few scarce resources are being allocated to this market, so therefore it's allocatively inefficient. On the previous presentation, looking at negative externalities, too many scarce resources were being allocated to production, so again, allocatively inefficient.